Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin Clark. I am the head speech coach at Gothenburg High School. I have been involved in this activity for over 20 years. I have been a participant, I have been an assistant coach, a head coach, a judge, you name it. I have been actively involved in the speech community in the state of Nebraska. I am so excited to get to visit with you today about one of my favorite events, which happens to be Serious Prose. So I hope that you find the ideas and the information here helpful to you and to your speakers as you get ready for your season. So what is Serious Prose? Serious Prose is obviously one of our interpretive events, which means that your speakers are going to be taking a piece of literature, prose, a play, some kind of a story that's already written, has already been published by someone else, and interpreting those words to your audience. They're bringing that story to life. So literally interpreting someone else's words for their audience. When it comes to general rules, it's pretty simple with Serious Prose, believe it or not. There is a 10-minute maximum time limit for Serious Prose. There's no minimum, so your story can be as short as it needs to be, but your students will find more success the longer it is, the more story they're able to build. So the closer you can get to that 10-minute mark, the better. There's a 30-second leeway, grace period, you might hear somebody call it. So technically, your students can perform to 10 minutes and 30 seconds, but it will definitely make your judges nervous if you're pushing that 10:30 mark. So really try to work with your students to hit right around that 10-minute mark. Something for the 2024-2025 school year that is being reintroduced to the ballot is that there is disqualification criteria for Serious Prose now. You cannot use a commercially produced cutting of a Serious Prose. So what that means is you cannot use something that has already been seen, used, performed on a commercial scale. So the best examples I can give you would be finding a DI is something, you might hear it called DI every so often, depending on which part of the state you're in, but you might find a dramatic interp. That comes from National Speech Debate and Association final rounds that are posted on YouTube. That your students can't use. Not only is it plagiarism to take someone else's material and copy it and perform it, but also then we're doing something that's been commercially produced already. And so that is a disqualification criteria. That DQ can also come from, taking something like a Saturday Night Live sketch. Now that won't happen in Serious Prose, but it's the same kind of premise. You can't take something that's already been cut and used and performed by someone else, hand it to your students, and expect a copy and paste. So when it comes to the process of developing a Serious Prose, one thing that I like to do with my students is obviously first and foremost send them out into the world of literature to find the story that they want to tell. Your kids have to be connected to that story. If you hand them a script and it's something that you like but it doesn't fit them, they'll never help it come to life. They'll never reach their full potential. So that includes lots of reading. Kids, I think, sometimes assume that the first script that they get is going to be the right script, and it's usually not. It might be a good idea, but it may not be the right script. So lots of reading. Send them, like I said, towards scripts. Those are great, but also don't be afraid to look into short stories or pieces of prose that can actually be turned into a Serious Prose. So you've got to settle on the story. And once you've found the story, the piece that you want to tell, then the cutting process begins. You want to make sure that the story you're going to tell fits that 10-minute time frame. So you have to be conscious of that. Obviously, you don't want the lines to butt right up against that 10-minute mark. Otherwise, you won't have room to let the story come to life and to breathe and to act. So you have to kind of play around with that. The less lines you have, the more the story can breathe, but you also have to have enough of the story that the plot is relevant, the climax is present. You need all those things. So it takes multiple cuts. My kids never get it the first time. That first cut is usually 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and then we get it closer to 10, and then we get it under 10. Because after you get that story finalized within that 10-minute time frame, you also need to include an introduction. So introductory remarks, it depends on your piece, it depends on your style, it depends on what fits your kid, but at minimum, they need to include the title of the piece and the author. So then the next thing is your intro. You want to include introductory remarks for your piece, so your audience and your judge knows what your piece is. But those introductory remarks can also help set up the story that you're about to tell. So at minimum, you need to introduce the piece with the title and the author or playwright. You have to do those things. But background information can be helpful and can guide the ideas that your audience are going to hear and experience with you and your students along the way. So make sure you ensure there's time for that introduction to fall right in line. And then the final step of the prep process is bringing it to life. Your speaker is going to be portraying characters in the story, so they have to become those individuals. If it's somebody real, as in someone's biography that you are doing, then they're going to need to spend time studying that person, so that way it is a realistic representation of them. Thank goodness for YouTube and interviews and recordings and things that you can do, because your judges will, be looking for those things. If you have a student that's going to be portraying Judy Garland, they need to make sure that they are Judy Garland when they present the piece to the audience. Build the characters from the ground up. So think about their feet, think about their hips, their core, their chest. Now, to be quite honest, good character work comes from your core up. It should be your eyes and your arms and your facials should be what's really leading you through the performance. You have to include all of those pieces so it feels real. So also think about voice, think about demeanor, traits, those kinds of things. So make the character or characters real. And then you also have to think about telling the story. Where are the highs and the lows? So it can't all live in the same energetic atmosphere the entire time, because if it does, your audience is going to tune out because nothing changes. But you also can't wait until minute 9 to finally find some energy. So the more ebbs and flows that you can take in a story, especially a series prose, the better. It helps draw your audience in. It builds the emotions. So remind your kids that you are building the emotions for their audience members. And so that's part of that journey. Find the action in the story. Have your characters interact, have them move, have them carrying objects, looking at objects, interacting, do something so that way they're not just standing. And that takes time. It doesn't come overnight. Those are the things that take the entire season to build those beautiful, minute details, those breaths, those pauses. And that's the fun stuff. That's the best part about interpretation events, is that you literally get to continually interpret an event. So, how can your students find success in serious prose? A good serious prose will grow all season. What you start out with, whether it's in November, December, January, February, should not be the same thing that the kids are taking with them to conference and districts and hopefully state. Find something new each week for your kids to work on. Find something new in a character, in an action, in a phrase, in the way they deliver a phrase, but make that a goal for you and your students. Remember that your story needs a good beginning, middle, and an end. Those don't necessarily have to be equally balanced in thirds, but without that, you're not going to be able to tell a complete story. Your performance won't be anything without that story, that obvious story. Also remember that the climactic moment of the serious prose cannot happen in the first 5 minutes. If you get to that climactic moment in minute 5, and then your performer is living the rest of those 5 minutes in that same energetic level, they're going to burn out. Your audience isn't going to be able to pay attention. So keep that in mind. That's where those ebbs and flows come again. Build, 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 build. Take your audience on the journey. Take them on that emotional roller coaster with you, wanting to find out what comes at the end. Another key point about serious prose success comes from realistic and believable characters. You can kind of phrase it either way for your kids. If you're on the flip side, humorous prose allows for crazy, wacky, weird, big, giant characters. That doesn't work for serious prose. Serious prose is more intimate, it's more emotional, it's more of a journey, and so it relies on those characters being genuine. because you have to access the truth for those serious prose characters in order for that truth to come forward for your audience. Sometimes it's hard for kids, high school kids, to reach the depth of emotions that their characters might be experiencing. Kiddos have had less life experience than we have. So it's your job to help them connect the best that they can. Provide insight from the adult perspective that might help them, or help them find a new emotion or a new way to interpret that deeper piece, because they may not have those instances in their toolbox yet. So they may need your help along the way to find those believable characters. Series prose also needs space. That's kind of my last key to success with a series prose. It can't be line, all the way through for 10 minutes. It has to have space. It has to breathe. Your characters have to be able to respond to what's been said or what they're feeling. So make sure that you help your kids give that space. They're going to want to use up every single second to tell the story. It's a challenge in the best way to create the best kind of serious prose with space and air to breathe for you, for your audience, so that they can feel things along the way. Last little thing I have for you, my pieces of advice, I've kind of already mentioned one of them, space. Make sure that not only do you have space in the story, but that your students are using the space as they perform. Again, they can't be like a humorous prose where they're running all over the room. That just doesn't fit the nature of a serious piece. But give them the freedom to move and use their body, their arms, to physically encapsulate the characters that they are, and help that reach the audience. Real stories. That's another piece of advice that I have for you. There are great series prose pieces that are published in every publishing company that you will find. And some of those have a lot of magic, and there are stories to be told. But don't be afraid of the real stories. Go out and find real stories of real human beings and the real experiences that they have. That will grab your audience and your judge in ways that they never expected. It's amazing what happens when you can help a student discover the story of someone that's lived in history, or someone that's currently living, telling their story, or living through a memoir. There's empathy that's built through those kinds of things. It takes work to find the real life stories, but I can't recommend it enough. They'll stand out and around if they are doing something unique and if they're doing something real. And it's easier for them to tap into those real emotions of a real person than it might be someone's fictionalized, especially on a serious prose level. Last piece of advice that I have when it comes to serious prose is volume does not equal intensity. I write that on ballots all season long. But what I mean by that, it kind of harkens back to some of those things that I've already said. You can't live in one energetic level the entire performance. That's hard for 10 minutes for your performer to do that, and it's also hard for your audience and your judges to listen to that same energy level for 10 minutes. I can't be yelled at for 10 minutes straight. You can't be yelled at for 10 minutes straight. Neither can your kids. So volume does not equal intensity. So just because you're louder doesn't mean that's creating a climax. Just because you're louder doesn't mean that your character's showing more emotion. You have to find nuanced ways to show those emotions. And you have to give us some loud, but then you have to give us some soft moments as well, because without that, our ears aren't going to be able to listen the whole time. And just because a character is angry doesn't mean they're going to shout. Just because a character is sad doesn't mean they're going to sob uncontrollably. You're going to engage your audience more deeply if you can find unexpected ways to share those emotions, or find more genuine ways to express those emotions. We don't get angry instantly. There's a buildup. There are many things that lead us to that anger. So you can't just flip a switch and have a character be angry. What got them to that point of being angry or sad? It's a buildup. So you kind of have to think about it through the entire piece that way. But volume does not equal intensity. That'll get you a long way in serious prose. I hope those are some helpful tips and tricks in there to help you and your performers as you get ready for your season. Don't be afraid of serious prose. It scares a lot of people because it is deeper and it is serious, and people think it's not as fun as humorous prose, but encourage your strong actors to take on a serious prose. They're going to discover more about who they are as people. They're going to discover more about who they are as performers if they can tap into genuine emotions and tell a story that will leave their audience feeling and thinking something for a long, long time. Best of luck this season.